For the past 15 years, I've tended to this hotel, witnessing guests drift in and out like fleeting whispers of the sea, never lingering, always in pursuit of something just beyond reach. Some faces fade into the background, yet others remain etched in my memory, haunting me long after they've slipped away. It's a role that demands a delicate touch, an eye for the finer details, and an instinct to sense desires before they whisper into the air. At 39, I've crafted a life that appears refined and composed, or so I whisper to myself in the quiet moments. Yet my son Jacob has always been a tempest, wild and spontaneous, radiating a passion I could only dream of. At 17, he possesses a charm that captivates and leaves a lingering impression. A striking athlete, his chiseled features and effortless charm leave a trail of whispered giggles among the girls as he passes by. He remains blissfully unaware of the intoxicating allure he possesses, or perhaps he savors the secret just out of reach. Perhaps that's the reason he observes so intently. It began with a whisper, a delicate dance of glances and unspoken desires. A stolen glance in the lobby as he arrived to whisk me away after my shift. His storm-colored eyes danced over me, igniting a thrill I couldn't quite decipher. Then there were the stolen moments at home. In fleeting moments, I would find his eyes lingering on me, a heartbeat of hesitation before he turned away, leaving a whisper of intrigue in the air. At first, I believed it was merely a figment of my imagination. In the end, he was merely my beloved son. What could possibly compel him to do so? I silenced the thought before it could blossom into something more daring. The tension lingered, electric and undeniable, in the hushed whispers shared between us. How his eyes sought me out amidst the throng, a secret dance of longing in plain sight. Yet, despite my efforts to push it away, a singular truth lingered, undeniable and intoxicating. Jacob observed with a knowing glance. Yet, I found myself lost in the mystery of it all. The hotel lobby whispered with the soft cadence of polished shoes gliding over marble, intimate exchanges between travelers, and the alluring murmur of the concierge attending to a guest's request. For 15 years, I lingered in this enchanting place, observing the ebb and flow of guests, savoring the intoxicating aroma of freshly brewed coffee entwined with the delicate whispers of elegance. The hotel was my refuge, my stronghold, until this evening's unexpected turn. This evening, my past has slipped through its defenses. Charles stood before me, his dark brown eyes filled with longing. His hands reached for me, desperate and yearning, like a lover lost in a sea of longing. My former husband was a true charmer, effortlessly weaving his way out of trouble, until just a month ago when I uncovered his most exquisite treachery. The vision of him entwined in another's embrace lingered in my thoughts, as striking and fresh as if it had unfolded just moments ago. "You can't pretend I don't exist, Isabella," Charles implored, his tone a sultry whisper. I faltered, "But don't let that shadow the passion we once shared." I drew in a breath, my heart racing. My patience is frayed, a delicate thread pulled taut by weeks of unanswered calls and unreturned messages. His messages overflowed with sweet apologies, tender memories of our shared moments, and fervent pleas to win back my heart. Yet, I was no longer the woman he had wed. I had transformed into someone who held her heart with a fiercer grip, no longer one to forgive so readily. "There's nothing left to erase, Charles," I said, my voice steady yet laced with an undeniable tension. "You brought this upon yourself." His jaw tightened, a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. His suave allure faltering beneath the burden of my refusal. He had always carried an air of arrogance, convinced that no matter his transgressions, I would inevitably welcome him back into my heart. That had always been the course of events, until this moment. "I cannot bear the thought of losing you," he murmured, drawing nearer. "You are my entire world, Isabella." I stepped back, my arms wrapped tightly around myself. "Perhaps you should have considered that before you shattered it all." Just as he opened his mouth to respond, the hotel doors glided open, ushering in a refreshing breeze that danced through the lobby. I turned my gaze, and a flutter of anticipation stirred within me. Jacob. His figure was undeniably captivating. He stood tall and broad-shouldered, exuding a confidence that effortlessly captivated all who crossed his path. Clad in a casual hoodie and sleek joggers, a hint of allure lingers in the air. He exuded a captivating allure, a blend of power and grace that drew her in. His golden brown hair, still glistening from a recent shower, hinted at the allure of his athletic endeavors. Yet it was not merely his presence that ignited a thrilling shiver along my spine. His body tightened at the mere sight of Charles before me, a silent tension crackling in the air. It caught my eye at once. The subtle change in his stance, the tension in his hands as they tightened at his sides, knuckles turning white from the intensity of his grip. His chiseled jawline tensed with an alluring intensity. His cheekbones danced with tension as he clenched his jaw, a captivating sight that hinted at unspoken desires. His storm-colored eyes, typically brimming with playful intrigue, deepened into a captivating allure that hinted at untold secrets. He had always harbored a certain disdain for his father, and now he found himself consumed by a deep-seated disdain for him. At that very moment, Charles's gaze met Jacob's, igniting an unspoken tension between us. And for the first time tonight, a tantalizing pause lingered in the air. His bravado faltered beneath the intensity of our son's watchful eyes. Yet I noticed how he straightened his back, a subtle reminder that he was still the man who once claimed a cherished spot in my heart. "Jacob," Charles said, his smile a delicate mask, concealing the turmoil within. "It's delightful to see you again." Jacob remained silent, an enigma wrapped in tension. Instead, he stepped forward with a tantalizing slowness, each movement laced with intention. His muscles coiled with a tantalizing intensity, barely holding back a simmering passion. I recognized the gaze. I had witnessed it before, during his basketball games, when an opponent had crossed the line with a harsh foul or whispered provocations on the court. Yet this was no mere adolescent feud. This was intimate. My heart raced with a thrilling intensity. "Go wait in the car, Jacob," I urged, my voice a whisper laced with urgency, hoping to ease the simmering heat between us. He turned away, unyielding. "What brings you here?" Jacob's voice was a sultry whisper, laced with an intensity that sent delightful shivers coursing through me. Charles sighed softly, his fingers gliding through his perfectly coiffed hair, attempting to embody the image of a composed father, though a hint of mischief lingered in the air. "I was speaking with your mother. Our past is complicated and—" Jacob's laughter held no warmth. A quick breath escaped his lips. "History. Is that what you consider a betrayal of her trust?" Charles hesitated, his facade faltering for the briefest moment. "You don't comprehend." "Oh, but I comprehend more than you think," Jacob interrupted, his voice smooth yet laced with an undercurrent of danger. He moved in closer, and for the first time, a hint of vulnerability flickered in Charles's eyes. My ex had always towered over me, wielding his stature like a weapon, but now, as he stood before our son, a striking young man, strong and brimming with a tempestuous energy, Charles seemed diminished. Jacob tilted his head, his gaze smoldering with an alluring chill. "Do you believe you can return after everything that transpired?" Charles exhaled sharply, his head shaking in disbelief. "This matter lies solely between me and your mother." Jacob's fist tightened, a storm brewing within. "Absolutely not." "It's not." I stepped closer, my hand resting firmly against Jacob's chest, sensing the tautness of his muscles beneath my touch. His breath quickened, and the warmth emanating from him enveloped me. "Jacob," I whispered, yearning to draw him back from the precipice he seemed to linger upon. "Go outside." His eyes met mine for a fleeting moment, a softness passing between us, but just as quickly, he turned his attention back to Charles, the tension returning. "I'm not going to hit you," Jacob finally declared, though the way his fists quivered at his sides revealed the struggle it took to restrain himself. "It's not that you don't deserve it, but she deserves more than yet another battle." Charles sighed, his disbelief palpable as he shook his head. He stepped back, yet his gaze lingered on me. "This isn't over," he murmured softly. I raised my chin, my voice steady and alluring. "Yes, Charles. It is." He gazed at me, his eyes lingering, before he turned and exited the hotel in silence. The moment the door clicked shut, a sense of relief washed over me, lifting the heaviness in my heart. Yet beside me, Jacob remained rigid, a taut figure poised like a predator on the brink of a thrilling chase. "Hey." I leaned in closer, my fingers gently cradling his face, as I had done in the tender days of his youth. "It's all right." I could feel the tension in his jaw under my touch. His gaze remained fixed on the place where his father had once stood, a lingering tension in the air. After a moment, he released a slow breath, his shoulders easing ever so slightly. "He's a piece of work," Jacob murmured, his voice tinged with a raw edge. I smiled coyly. "Yes, he is." Jacob finally met my gaze, and in that moment, the tempest in his eyes settled into a serene calm. "Shall we retreat to our sanctuary?" he whispered, a mischievous glint in his eye. And just like that, the weight in my heart dissolved into a sweet sigh. In the midst of the chaos that Charles stirred and the haunting whispers of the past, Jacob stood steadfast, a guardian in the shadows, his presence a soothing balm to my restless heart. For the first time in weeks, a warm presence enveloped me, banishing the solitude that had lingered too long. The journey back was wrapped in an enchanting hush. Not the kind of silence that wrapped around them like a warm embrace, but one heavy with the weight of desires left unsaid. Jacob's fingers curled around the steering wheel, a mix of tension and anticipation coursing through him. His knuckles gleamed softly against the rich leather. His jaw was set tight, those storm-colored eyes locked on the path before us, yet I could sense the electric tension coursing through him. I had witnessed his anger before, a tempest of fury that ignited the air around us. On the basketball court, a referee's misjudgment sparked a heated moment, igniting whispers and glances that danced like flames in the air. At school, when a rival dared to insult his beloved teammates. Yet, this was unlike anything else. This was intimate. His silence since we departed the hotel wrapped around me like a velvet cloak, stirring a disquiet that danced just beyond my understanding. I let out a soft breath, savoring the moment. "Jacob, I should have struck him." His voice was a sultry murmur, low and rough, barely escaping his lips. Yet, the intensity of those words left my breath suspended in the air. I turned to him, my gaze lingering on his features. "No, you absolutely shouldn't have." He let out a soft laugh, a hint of disbelief dancing in his eyes. "Do you truly believe he should escape unscathed?" "Indeed," I replied with conviction. "Because regardless of his actions, he doesn't deserve your wrath." His fingers tightened around the wheel. "That's not the issue." What could it possibly be? Pressed against the soft fabric, a moment suspended in time, where desire danced just beneath the surface. Jacob exhaled softly, savoring the moment. He gazed at you, as if the possibility lingered, as if a fragment of you still belonged to him. A delightful shiver danced down my spine. "I belong to no one," I replied, my voice unwavering. Jacob's jaw clenched with a mix of desire and restraint. "Then why did you allow him to speak to you?" I asked, a hint of disapproval in my voice. "I didn't allow him to take any liberties. You chose to stay." I blinked, taken aback by the intensity in his tone. His ire was not solely directed at Charles. His eyes burned with frustration. "I didn't wish to create a spectacle in the hotel, Jacob," I replied, my voice steady yet laced with an undercurrent of tension. "I managed the situation with grace." His grip on the wheel tightened. "You shouldn't have to handle anything." I sighed, turning to face him completely, the air thick with unspoken tension. "I cherish your desire to shield me, darling, but I am more than capable of facing my own challenges." He remained silent. The muscles in his shoulders remained taut, his face etched with that familiar, hardened expression. I longed to reach out, to gently ease the tension from his brow, to whisper that this burden was not his alone to bear. Yet, there was an undeniable tension in the way he sat, poised and taut, that made me pause. I turned my gaze to the window, the city lights swirling like fleeting dreams. When did my son begin to shoulder my weight? As we glided into the driveway, the atmosphere between us crackled with unspoken words. Jacob silenced the engine and lingered in the stillness, his gaze fixed on the house. "Are you coming inside?" He nodded slowly, his gaze lingering, yet he remained still. His quiet presence stirred a delightful unease within me. "Jacob," I whispered, my voice barely breaking the silence. At last, he turned to meet my gaze. His eyes, those tempestuous, stormy hues that had always danced with joy and playfulness, now shimmered with an intensity that stirred something within me, something profound and unspoken. "I simply can't comprehend it," he whispered, his voice laced with intrigue. "How could he let you go so easily?" I fought back the tears, threatening to spill. "Some men only realize their treasure when it's lost." His eyes deepened with intensity. "Then he's a complete fool." A delicate smile danced at the edge of my lips. "Indeed, he is." Jacob sighed, his fingers threading through his hair, and at last, some of the weight on his shoulders appeared to lift. We emerged from the car, the cool night air wrapping around us like a whispered secret. I unlocked the front door and pushed it open, allowing the inviting warmth of our sanctuary to envelop me in its embrace. Wrapped in warmth, it felt as if it belonged to me alone. Jacob stepped in after me, the door clicking softly as he closed it, sealing us in a world of our own. "I need a shower," he murmured, his fingers brushing the nape of his neck. "Go ahead," I replied, my gaze following him as he slipped off his sneakers and ascended the stairs. I lingered for a moment, my heart fluttering with a delicious unease. Tonight held an air of enchantment, a whisper of secrets waiting to be unveiled. Not merely for Charles. Not merely due to the clash. Yet, it was the way Jacob's gaze had lingered on me that stirred something deep within. The way his hands had tightened, his jaw set in a determined line. His voice took on an edge, a hint of something deeper, as he mentioned Charles. It was a tempest of emotions, a fire that ignited something deeper. It was an experience unlike any other. And I found myself at a loss with that intoxicating revelation. The house held a hushed stillness, a secret waiting to be unveiled. Jacob had been upstairs for what felt like an eternity, and I found myself wandering through the mundane, sorting paperwork, replying to emails, even brewing a cup of tea, all in a futile attempt to occupy my restless mind. Yet, my mind couldn't help but wander back to him, to the allure of his quietude, to the way he had gazed upon me. This evening left me with a lingering sense of unease, as if a delicate veil had been lifted, marking a moment where everything changed, an unspoken boundary now lingered in the air. Yet I found myself wondering if I had ventured too far, or if he had dared. With a soft sigh, I placed my tea aside and ascended the stairs, anticipation fluttering in my chest. Jacob's door stood ajar, inviting a whisper of intrigue. I lingered, caught in a moment of uncertainty. Then she tapped softly against the polished surface. "My dearest Jacob." In the stillness, his voice emerged, soft and intimate. "Step inside." I gently eased the door open, a thrill of anticipation coursing through me. He lounged at the edge of his bed, freshly showered, droplets glistening in his damp hair, his skin radiating warmth from the lingering steam. He slipped into a pair of relaxed sweatpants that hinted at his form, paired with a snug t-shirt that clung just right. His broad shoulders curved ever so slightly, hinting at a secret longing. He gazed at her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine, a hint of mischief dancing in his eyes. The air between them crackled with unspoken desires, each glance a promise of stolen moments and whispered secrets. In that fleeting instant, the world around them faded, leaving only the intoxicating allure of their connection. Weary exposed. I slipped inside, gently shutting the door with a soft click. "Are you all right, my dear?" He exhaled softly, a hint of longing in the air. Indeed. Yet, my heart remained unconvinced. I glided over, settling next to him on the bed, the air thick with unspoken desires. For a lingering moment, silence enveloped us, thick with unspoken desires. At long last, I despise the sight of him close to you, Jacob confessed, his voice laced with a raw intensity. Released a breath, heavy with unspoken desires. Oh, I see. His hands tightened into delicate fists, resting against his thighs with a tension that hinted at unspoken desires. He has no right to gaze upon you in such a way. I stifled the quickening of my heartbeat. Jacob glanced over, a spark of intrigue dancing in his eyes. His eyes captured mine, a silent promise lingering in the air. I can't stand the way those men gaze at you, he whispered, his voice laced with a hint of possessiveness. His voice danced softly, a tantalizing secret shared in the dim light. A delightful tension stirred within me. Oh, Jacob. His gaze deepened with a tantalizing intensity. His words danced too close to the edge for my liking. My breath hitched. His jaw tightened with a subtle intensity. It irks me how he clings to the illusion of possessing you. The room seemed to close in around us. More enticing. I parted my lips to utter a confession, yet the words lingered, tantalizingly trapped within me. Jacob's eyes danced from my lips to my gaze, a tantalizing spark igniting between us. For the first time, a delicious mystery enveloped my thoughts, leaving me utterly captivated by the enigma of his mind. And that filled me with a thrilling fear. The echoes of the previous night danced in the air, a tantalizing reminder that clung to me long after I stepped away from Jacob's embrace. Even as I reclined in my own sanctuary, gazing at the ceiling above, my thoughts danced restlessly, refusing to settle. It was more than just Charles. It wasn't merely the way Jacob had positioned himself between us, a protective barrier that stirred a thrill in the air. His gaze held a promise, as if I were a treasure he was destined to safeguard. I nestled onto my side, drawing the blanket closer, attempting to persuade myself that the whispers of the night were mere figments of my imagination. He belongs to you, heart and soul. That was meant to be the one undeniable truth amidst all the intrigue. The singular truth that ignited my heart. And yet, a delicate change had stirred in the air. And despite my efforts to dismiss it, I could sense it weaving its way into the space between us. The following morning, I discovered Jacob in the kitchen, already stirring with life, leaning against the counter, a protein shake in one hand and his phone in the other, exuding an effortless charm that made my heart flutter. I lingered by the doorframe, my gaze tracing his every move for just a heartbeat longer. "You've risen with the dawn," I remarked, my tone laced with a gentle allure. He tilted his head just enough to cast a playful glance my way, a charmingly crooked smile dancing on his lips. Morning rendezvous. Of course, basketball was his passion, the very essence that anchored his soul. Even after the enchantment of last night, he remained undeniably Jacob. The very boy who once spent his carefree childhood pursuing a ball, the same one who would drift into slumber in the back seat of my car after those exhilarating tournaments. His jersey, a tantalizing blend of sweat and triumph. Yet that charming boy had vanished into thin air. The young man in my kitchen exuded an alluring intensity, taller and stronger than I remembered, igniting a spark of something dangerously enchanting between us. I cleared my throat, dismissing the tantalizing thought that lingered in the air. "Text, in just 2 days, we celebrate your special day," I whispered, gliding into the kitchen and gently pulling open the fridge door. "Have you pondered your deepest desires?" Jacob placed his shake aside, leaning against the counter with a casual grace, his arms elegantly crossed over his chest. His eyes lingered on me, a mysterious spark dancing within their depths. Then, a sly smile danced at the edge of his lips. "Indeed," he whispered. "I've pondered it deeply." I arched an eyebrow, intrigue dancing in my gaze. "And what else lies beneath the surface of our unspoken desires?" His fingers danced lightly against the countertop, a subtle rhythm that hinted at unspoken desires. His expression held a tantalizing mystery. Let's steal away to the hotel where you work and indulge in a night just for us." My eyes widened, a delightful surprise washing over me. What is this enchanting mystery that beckons me closer? His smirk deepened, hinting at secrets untold. It's an intriguing allure, a delightful twist on the ordinary. We'll indulge in room service, lose ourselves in films, just. He offered a casual shrug, a hint of mischief dancing in his eyes. Indulge in delight. My heart fluttered with uncertainty. It was a request that danced on the edge of propriety. I found myself in the most exquisite suites of the hotel, where every moment felt like a whispered secret waiting to be shared. An intimate escape filled with indulgence. Just the two of us, lost in our own world, away from prying eyes. Yet, the way he uttered those words sent a delightful shiver through me. Yet I managed to conjure a smile. That is precisely what you desire. An enchanting evening in a luxurious hotel. Jacob nodded, his gaze lingering on me with a hint of intrigue. I breathed out softly, brushing away the peculiar sensation that lingered against my heart. "Very well," I replied. "If that is your desire, then that shall be our course of action." His gaze deepened with a hint of intrigue, as though he were taken aback by my swift acquiescence. "Indeed." I nodded, my fingers curling around the warm coffee mug resting on the counter, a small thrill coursing through me. "Indeed." As I lifted the cup to my lips, I chose to overlook the subtle tremor in my hands, cradling the delicate ceramic with a hint of anticipation. 2 days later, I slipped the key card into Jacob's hand as we entered the elevator, a thrill of anticipation hanging in the air between us. He gently plucked it from my fingers, caressing it delicately between his thumb and forefinger. His expression was a tantalizing mystery. He inquired about the penthouse suite, his gaze lingering on me with a hint of mischief. Glimmered with a secretive smile. Tonight is a night to remember. On the eve of his 18th birthday. Turning point. I convinced myself that the lavish room was merely a practical choice, a necessity for the occasion. The ascent was hushed, the air thick with unspoken tension, broken only by the delicate chime of each floor we passed. As we ascended to the pinnacle, the doors gracefully parted, unveiling a secluded corridor that beckoned us toward our intimate retreat. Jacob glided into the room, his gaze sweeping over the space with a hint of intrigue. It was utterly enchanting. Expansive windows framing the cityscape, sumptuous leather seating, and a grand king-sized bed adorned with pristine white linens. A setting that seemed to be plucked from the silver screen, exuding an air of enchantment and allure. I placed my overnight bag beside the couch, a hint of anticipation lingering in the air. "What are your thoughts, my dear?" Jacob turned, his eyes holding mine for a heartbeat longer than propriety allowed. "It's simply exquisite." A smile danced on my lips, attempting to dispel the curious flutter that had taken residence in my heart. "Delightful." As I glided by him, making my way to the minibar, I sensed his gaze lingering on me. For the first time, doubt danced in my mind, teasing the edges of reality and fantasy. We surrendered to the allure of the hotel, savoring every exquisite moment it had to offer. Jacob indulged in a lavish feast, ordering nearly everything on the room service menu, a delightful excess that hinted at mischief and allure. With a playful laugh, he reclined on the couch, a tray of delectable treats resting invitingly on his lap. I observed him, a smile playing on my lips as he indulged in steak, shrimp, and chocolate cake, his appetite a delightful testament to youthful abandon. The most enchanting birthday yet. I playfully sipped from my glass of wine, a mischievous glint in my eye. He flashed a sly grin, casually brushing his lips with the back of his hand. "Absolutely among the finest." I let out a soft sigh, my eyes dancing with playful exasperation. "Just the finest 3. He let out a soft laugh, his plate forgotten for a moment. "Grant me a moment. The evening still holds its secrets." I chuckled softly, a playful smile dancing on my lips. "You are utterly enchanting." He shrugged, a charming smile playing on his lips. Yet, beneath the surface, an undeniable allure lingered. A whisper of desire. Later that night, as we slipped into something more comfortable, the the spark ignited once more. As I nestled into the plush couch, wrapped in a soft robe, I lazily flicked through the channels on the grand flat-screen TV, savoring the cozy solitude. Jacob sat beside me, his warmth enveloping me, our proximity charged with an unspoken thrill. The warmth of his presence enveloped me, the gentle rhythm of his breath a tantalizing melody against the night. "You're so quiet," I whispered, stealing a glance at him. He gazed at me, a lingering moment stretching between us, his expression a tantalizing mystery. "Being here with you ignites a delightful thrill in my heart." The words flowed effortlessly, yet the way he uttered them sent a delightful shiver through me, leaving my breath caught in a tantalizing pause. I took a deep breath. "Being here with you, my dear, is simply delightful." His eyes danced from my lips to meet mine, a spark of mischief lingering in the air. A delightful flutter stirred within me. "My dearest Jacob." "I truly mean it," he murmured, his voice laced with a hint of allure. A tantalizing tension enveloped us, rich with an indescribable allure. I ought to have slipped away into the night. I ought to have brushed it aside with a smile. I gently swept his hair from his eyes, just as I used to when he was a boy. I whispered for him to retire for the night. Yet I refrained. Instead, I lingered there, my heart racing beneath my skin, my fingers delicately clutching the edge of my robe. My gaze lingered on him, a silent invitation hanging in the air, and he met her gaze with an undeniable intensity, as if he had been anticipating her arrival all along, as if we were poised on the brink of an enchanting mystery, neither of us fully grasping the allure that beckoned us forward. And for the very first time, my heart danced with a thrill of forbidden delight. I found myself at a delightful crossroads, uncertain of the path to take.